what is your assessment today of the ecosystem, the tech ecosystem, of course?
So they coined something called the Next 11, and in that list, and this was like around 2010 or so.
Okay.
The only one that I saw that had some level of street credentials, very limited street credentials, was Pakistan. Much like
so
you.
Pakistan was next 11.
Exactly.
Okay. How happened that India made it to edtech? I know there's like big Baiju.
1.5.
It's good that you talk about unicorns. Actually, I don't believe much in unicorns.
I'm on the same page with.
And how do you see the next 2-3 years? Because 5 years for me, it's already too long to project, but. And things are.
So I live in 2030, so for me, like.
So you live already in 2030.
Like, mentally, I'm like, because my thesis, if you spend time focusing on something,
right.
like you literally, you may not get it right, but you can actually get it as close as possible. And now the next iteration, obviously, is what I would encourage founders to do, is I would focus more on blockchain and AI and the merger of those two, because it's a really interesting time you're heading into where. The big LLMs treat them like iOS and Android, and then the app stores were launching. So you can now solve problems by developing local agents with local use cases.
I'm so excited for that.
That's the fun part.
Welcome to this new episode of Wasssl Media Podcast. I'm so happy to have Faisal with me. Which is a very prominent investor in the ecosystem of Pakistan and also globally. Thank you, Faisal, for being here. Thank you for having some time and being part of this discussion. I think we have a lot of things to learn from you, but first, just like a little bit of introduction. How will you introduce yourself? I think that a lot of people knows you already, but just like a little introduction.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm a Pakistani American. Moved back to Pakistan in 2017 with a very concerted thesis that a lot of what's playing out today. I was in New York during the 2008 global financial crisis, where the story begins, and that was the first time I woke up in my life, because until that point, anything that came out of mainstream media was the equivalent of like scripture to me. And then you start realizing that wait a minute, how can the whole system come down to collapse almost? And nobody knew about it. So then you start researching. There are people like Kyle Bass. There's the gentleman from Passport Capital. I'm forgetting the other guy's name, who's also in the book Too Big to Fail. But anyways, there were enough people spotting this and shorting the market early on. Mm-hmm. And so that particular event is so important, because what we call inflation today, which is primarily what's driving up venture capital, values of startups, real estate, pretty much everything around us has gotten costlier, and cost of living has become unbearable in certain parts of the world. So that component is linked to that cycle that started back then, and that's also the key moment where digitization accelerated. When I say digitization accelerated, the whole event started in late 90s, but really between the liquidity cycles that you see between 2008. Then the next cycle comes in 2020, and now we're about to experience the subsequent cycle. What you see each time is massive adoption of technology after each one of these cycles. So for me, it was very interesting that when I looked at Goldman Sachs, they love to coin regions. So there's Southeast Asia, that's a hub. There's MENA or GCC, that's a hub. So they coined something called the Next 11. And in that list, and this was like around 2010 or so.
Okay.
The only one that I saw that had some level of street credentials, very limited street credentials, was Pakistan. Much like you.
So Pakistan was next 11.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's Pakistan, Nigeria, Egypt, Mexico, all these countries that have massive amounts of a massive underlying black economy.
And black economy.
And really comes in the cycle we're in today. As in the internet layers that I was talking about a little bit earlier, whether you have the video over IP disruption, voice over IP disruption, and now you're in the exchange of value disruption, which you would term downstream as fintech and money merging with the internet. And then obviously money has multiple layers. You have currency, you have commodities, which is actually where the money layer is. And then above that, you have basically your housing, securities, derivatives, real world assets, or tokens, which what are known to others as
the blockchain now.
Exactly, Ethereum or Solana. Those are like operating systems, right? That are traded in real time. So those things make countries like Pakistan so important, because suddenly we were lagging in the industrial age, we were lagging in the financialized world. Financialized world, when I say that's the order we've been living in since 1971, predominantly 1980. In my opinion, that order ended in 2020. And now we're in this new digital order where everything is going to be documented through technology, whether it's tokens, tracing your real estate assets. And then obviously there's regulations that have been pointing, FATF and OECD Common Reporting Standards. These have been pushing for cashless systems in countries like Pakistan and Egypt, predominantly through debt. So we take on a lot of debt and then we have to listen to these institutions to be part of the global framework. And so that's a huge upside. And so that's the lens with which I've been investing here. And then investing in the pieces that accelerate that adoption.
So you've seen this like 10 years ago? What was the trigger like?
No, I woke up in 2008,
like,
but by 2013, 14, because what I did was I went back and started studying history all over again. And the monetary system.
Since you don't know much about Pakistan, you left it very young.
Actually, I started studying the history of where I was living in the US. I mean, I've read it through in college, but I started reading the actual history, which I think is important, which is the monetary system. That's the actual power, right? The reserve currency. So when you start reading up on all that, then you start realizing, wait a minute, there's a pattern here.
I've read The Currency War also.
Yes,
Song
exactly.
Being Song. Oh, it was a depressive book for me.
That's the stuff I was reading in like 2009, 10, 11.
Okay.
And then it creates a formulation. But then you see an opportunity. That's the good part, right? Initially, you get depressed because a lot of data. And then subsequently, you realize, wait a minute, there's a huge amount of opportunity. I'm obviously not an activist. So I chose a non-activist side. And I chose to just build
Pragmatic side.
Pragmatic, exactly.
Pragmatic side. Okay, so what is your assessment today of the Pakistani ecosystem? You've been navigating in it the last 6-7 years, you say, that around?
Almost about 8 years. So
8 years. You've been navigating it. You've seen that there is a lot of opportunity in it that people don't see. Like, it's the crisis. Nothing is going on. Everyone's want to run away from the country, and you came back. What is your assessment today of the ecosystem, the tech ecosystem, of course?
Look, so it's 250 million people. It was a huge opportunity. We do everything that we do with data analytics, right? So why does this opportunity exist? In an ideal world, if we had done things correctly, India and the rest of the region, whether you look at Southeast Asia, we always love to compare ourselves with India, so I'll give some numbers there. So India launched 3G and 4G in 2006 and 11 respectively. That's extremely important when it comes to these type of markets because people need access to smartphones to access user interfaces and apps. Now, if you don't have data, especially not talking about just ISP landline data, actual data from the telcos, smartphones don't work. And you're targeting people that can't afford laptops or desktops,
right?
But they can afford Android devices from whether it's Oppo or any of the Chinese or South Korean
$100
devices.
or...
Exactly, right? So that creates accessibility to the internet. So in Pakistan, we didn't auction those licenses. We had dongle stuff that were intermediaries, but the actual licenses came about in 2013 and 14. And so really the scaling of tech adoption started in 15. And so that's why when I looked at that number, when I was writing the deck for the first fund, it was mind-boggling because within 2 years you had it was roughly around 30 to 40 million people that were using smartphones. Now, when you compare that to like an Eastern European country or many European countries, that's like their total population, right? And that was just the tip of the iceberg. Now, fast forward to today, we're sitting at something like about 90 million active users out of 250 in terms of data. And that number is only going to keep increasing. The demographics are positive in the sense that most of the population is 60% is below the age of 30.
Very young.
I personally don't believe education has any correlation with tech adoption. My 2-year-old, she would, well now they're a lot older, my two girls. But I remember I would notice her, she figured out how when she would watch YouTube, that initially the play button and the stuff is still there.
Screen, yeah.
She knew how to tap it to make it go away, right? Intuitively. So there's a huge mental block we've created on ourselves that somehow English is the only language of communication and intellect is linked to that. I've met a lot of people that come from different demographics in this country that have very high intellect, and that's just a barrier for them. And the beauty is that now in the next paradigm that we're entering with AI, voice is the new command. The front end and the back end are going to change. So you're about to enter a paradigm where potentially somebody sitting in a remote part of Pakistan with a naturally born high IQ can communicate with somebody in Brazil, and the two of them can collectively solve a problem that's unique to them. So these type of things I think we underestimate, and that's why I'm bullish on Pakistan. That I think the potential of human beings is about to be unlocked in a very different way.
And what is today in terms of, I heard that you have like 2 funds now that you've been running from like different LPs.
Different LPs and different partners.
Different partners. And I've been running mainly investing in Pakistan.
Yes.
What are the sectors, how you evaluate? Because I know that there is, as you said, some optical illusion that international investors can have because they are lavishing after like a market of 250 million, which maybe sometimes is not real market.
Yep.
So what is your perspective today as a local investors really dip in the ecosystem?
Sure. So I'll unpack your multi-part question.
It's multidimensional.
So first I'll go on the funds. So the first fund I launched was called Laxon Venture Capital. It was in partnership with the Laxon Group. They're like the analogy would be like the Tata Group in India.
Right.
So multiple different facets. So we launched that first fund, brought a lot of the largest local business families into the fray, to convince them that they will eventually need to have tech exposure, given where the world is headed. Obviously, the smartest people do understand that, so they actually all took exposure. Then the second fund, and I did 6 investments from that. Then the second fund I launched, and some of those are like big names, are like companies like Rumi Hotels, which is like a chain of hotels that's targeting millennials and Gen Zers, asset light. And fairly digital in their approach and how they execute. Then BookMe, which is like the Orbitz or Expedia of Pakistan, and then Bag Gallery, which is a beauty and personal care platform. So very based on e-commerce and that element of disruption. Fund 2, obviously the thesis changed because it was pretty much confirmed to me that the exchange of value disruption protocol layer disruption is now going to accelerate. And it's not just a fad.
Right.
So in that, then the focus was primarily fintech, and that was all international investors, primarily institutionals out of the Gulf region, Abu Dhabi, broader GCC region, the US, UK, and then a lot of, not a lot, but some Pakistani expats, but a lot of them were like ex-tech entrepreneurs that had done big exits.
They understand what you're talking about.
And they end up being a soundboard where it's helpful for me, where I can actually connect them with the founders, right? So that was the first to answer that first part of your question. And again, between those 2 funds, I've done 30 investments. 10 of those are they're market leaders in their particular vertical. Then I think the second part of your question was how to identify founders. So look, I try not to invest. The number one mistake that international investors make, including some of the biggest funds, is basically you have a bias to believe that everybody is the same as them. What I was alluding to earlier was that there's a lot of people that come from very high intellect just because they didn't go to a pedigree school. That's not how we should be judging people, right? And I've backed founders that come from humble backgrounds, and they're the hungriest ones. They're the ones that ended up actually making big companies because they went all in. In my case, like when I try not to invest in people that are like me, because I know when I first came here, I had to go through my battle scars to figure out how to navigate this market. And so it's usually the ideal pairing is somebody that has a bird's eye view from a developed market, and they can trace those lag effects. And then the co-founder is somebody that's been in the trenches in Pakistan. And the key element is also to identify people that can solve the problems that they've experienced. So I really can't solve a busing travel problem if I try to become a founder, because I've never experienced that. So ideally you want someone.
That's pain.
and the economies of scale in this country is always going to exist for the middle income and lower middle income and lower income demographic, right? So that's really where the solutions have to come from. So I think that's one mistake, that don't just back someone who's an ex Google or ex Microsoft. I mean, they're smart people, but you make sure they're paired up with somebody that has street smart or street intellect in Pakistan as well. The other thing is, I think they overvalue companies. It's like when I first moved back.
That was a real problem.
Massive,
and Lyft died because of this.
Yeah, I mean, so it's across the board, right? So look, it's the same. When I first moved back, I had no idea what the cost of anything was. So I went, there's a market in Islamabad called Kosar, where they basically sell stuff to foreigners. And I went in and I think I bought a bag of chips that should have cost me like 300-400 rupees for like 2,000 rupees.
Oh,
and
okay.
Like, and I'm like, oh, Pakistan's fairly
I'm still
expensive.
struggling with that. I don't have the value of things.
Exactly. And then you understand these things eventually, right? So I think that was another element where they messed up. And the third one was not understanding. You can't do fake it till you make it like Silicon Valley in Pakistan.
No.
A lot of companies like Theranos, a lot of those
markets
guys.
is like
It's quick, and especially let's say Egypt and Pakistan, we're net importers of energy as a cycle, right? So when you're a net importer of energy, the second your economy starts to grow, and usually that's linked to like low interest rates. So it's comes down to understanding economic cycles in frontier markets, like Silicon Valley or developed markets, right? So you cannot fake it till you make it in Pakistan, counting only in incremental capital.
Right.
You have to basically very quickly adapt, because what happens in countries like Pakistan and Egypt specifically, that are net importers of energy, and when the interest rate cycles in developed markets fluctuate, that typically causes oil prices to fluctuate based on the global economy. And so in both of these countries, you have a currency pressure that comes in. So when the economy starts growing, let's say when the oil prices are low or the interest rates are low, consumption starts to go up, these economies grow. And then because they have a balance of trade issue, they're not exporting as much as they're importing. Suddenly, and they have to buy oil because energy consumption is going up. There's a rollover within 36 months. And so you have to ride those pings.
Oh my God, I never thought about it this way. Okay.
Because it's all liquidity, right?
It's
cost of capital.
Also.
Yeah.
Optical
Oh yes,
illusion?
so the optical illusion also is, look, we've had companies like Theranos, we've had lots of examples in Silicon Valley, right, and the region. You have to also look under the hood. Simply coming in and offering a safe to founders, just on an idea on a team, or even if they're just presenting you numbers, doing due diligence is an important part. What we saw in 2021, there was a lot of like a salesman gamesmanship that founders pulled off. Right. And a lot of newbie investors that hadn't invested in these markets before would just fall for it out of FOMO. That, hey, let me just jump in this deal before the other person. That not only created a bubble, but also created a lot of bad investments that basically give a bad rep to the ecosystem. They raise a lot of money, and then literally like a house of cards, they deflated as soon as liquidity disappeared. So, those are things for investors to also keep in mind. And Egypt's had that with Qatar and multiple other deals. So it happens in every ecosystem. It's not just unique to Pakistan. But as a smart investor, you want to avoid being in those type of deals.
And especially in emerging markets, as you said, the startup has that pressure and also that responsibility to be as break even as possible.
Yes.
Because you don't know where the next capital will come. Maybe it will never come.
Exactly. Like you can't apply models like, here's like $10 million. We're going to reward you for how quickly you burn it. That works in
only in US.
By the way, that worked in the US also only as long as you had near zero interest rates. Now, if you notice, even they're talking about profitability, sustainability. So the mantra has changed. We are bipolar in our industry, by the way. So investors as well, right? Silicon Valley, we come up with new narratives each time, which are completely hypocritical. We're telling founders to do something else to get funded before, and now we're doing something else.
Telling them
hopefully, I think we're on the right path now.
Especially because I think that, as you say, the emerging market has that problem also of liquidity, as we are importing much than we are exporting. And also in terms of money devaluation, it's like a huge problem. In Pakistan, it happened in Egypt also. I was remembering also international investors, they were telling that startup, I was in Egypt in November, they were telling that startup, you promised me that you will do in this month $80,000 of revenue, but you're doing only 60,000 because the money devaluate. Meanwhile, their KPIs was, but he has more users, but the money is like cost less.
Eventually it'll come in, but it's like so the way we factor in, like if you looked at Pakistan with our projections, till about 2017. 30 years preceding, if you streamline devaluation, obviously some years higher, some years less, it was about 5%.
Right.
Going forward, because obviously the US itself has gotten into shorter cycles, and the dollar itself you're seeing inflation for the first time in Europe. And anybody that's saying there's no inflation in Europe and the US, they just need to go to a restaurant and compare receipts from 5 years ago. It's like upwards of like, it's not been 9%. it was upwards of 20%. They just decided not to count food and energy in CPI. That's another debate. But obviously, when you're in this tail end of this monetary cycle that reset in 71 when the dealing from gold, and I think we're already in 2021. Or 2022 is when the new monetary system negotiations already started. It may take decades, but in that you have to navigate with this geopolitical mindset as well. And so for Pakistan, we factored in 13% devaluation streamline per year. It's not that bad because if you get IRRs of 60 to 70%, you just shave off 13. In USD, is still pretty decent returns, as long as you go in the right deals at the right time, right cost. A lot of this stuff matters, right?
Which is a right deal in Pakistan then?
So you go with
you have experience.
So it's about timing, right? So if you were doing, for example, in my fund one, I didn't do any fintech because fintech was not ready at that time. In 2022, 50% of the portfolio, 2021 fund, 50% of the portfolio is in fintech.
Okay.
And then it's in B2C, B2B e-commerce and B2C e-commerce. Again, verticals where there were gaps. But it's all about timing. So that's the number one thing, at least for
like the product market fit for the startup.
Exactly. So I'll give you an example. I get a lot of slack for ed tech, not doing ed tech. They're like, oh, it's such a big opportunity in Pakistan. I'm like, the TAM is not there. And then I get questioned, they're like, why? There's 43 million school-going kids. It's massive. And I'm like, okay, but how many of those have access to a meaningful enough screen or can afford one, right? It's less than 1 million because you can't take your mom and dad's phone and learn off of that, because it's usually one phone in a household. So in order for fintech to scale, edtech to scale, you need fintech to scale, where you then start offering middle income and lower middle income families. Again, that's always the target market, right? Where they can pay installments to buy decent tablets for 100
or laptops
or laptops.
Household.
Exactly, which then allows the access to all the ed tech platforms that got made in the country, right?
Yeah.
So there's so these are considerations that I think sometimes people get caught up in the larger narratives and they don't dissect it down to the local market.
But how happened that India made it to edtech? I know there's big Baiju.
1.5 billion. So Baiju went belly up, by the way. You know that, right?
Oh no.
So it was a pump. I mean, look, India has liquidity. They're also, again, they're ahead of us in the cycle. Number two, it's a massive opportunity, right? It's 1.5 billion people. So about 250 million is big. So over there, you probably still had at least 100 million people.
That 1% is already there.
Yeah, exactly, right? So then you can obviously, in the value, from a valuation perspective, 100 million people, if you're targeting, that's like 50% of Pakistan's population, right? That are the TAM. You crack 10 million. Getting to a unicorn is not that difficult, especially with when debasement, where basically $1 billion is turning into like the purchasing power of 100 million. So that quantum is also there. That's why you see so many.
It's good that you talk about unicorns. Actually, I don't believe much in unicorns.
I'm on the same page with
emerging market. So
most will exit for 100.
We're talking more about having like many actors operating in the same market and just like complementing each other and be able to solve that problem in that market.
Or you could do unicorns in rupees. So billion rupees is like $3.3 million.
Very fast to think.
No, but I agree with you. Like most of my portfolio, when we're doing an exit analysis, we think like companies will exit, good companies that we enter in, let's say, at a $5 million cap at a pre-seed. Right. We've seen some of those within 2 years that exit at $50 million, right? That's a pretty good return. Or 100 million or 200 million.
So where the exits are happening? Within the region, in Pakistan?
It's growth by acquisition. Look, so all this is interconnected, right? So again, this is my speculative thesis. I think the world is heading into two networks for today and eventually into a unified network. So one is the Chinese-led big tech network and a monetary system. And the other is the American-led big tech, Magnificent Seven-led growth by acquisition play. And so like Pac-Man, they're just coming and acquiring different regions, and then those companies become big. There's a flood of like venture capital that comes in linked to those big tech narratives, and then they back companies, make them big, then they acquire them, and then they start going to the next market. If you ever watched Star Trek, there was a cube that will float through the universe called the Borg. It's literally technology is eating up, software is eating up the world step by step, and so from that, it's so like clockwork. It happened where you saw one of the larger mobility companies in the world, they came in and bought one of our platforms because for them, Pakistan is the 7th strongest market in the world. So you're seeing those things, and I've seen my travel platform come in both Booking.com, Uber, and Trip.com have reviewed them 3 times. And the founder is very resilient, so he keeps turning down the offers because he thinks some opportunity for travel, which it is massive in Pakistan.
It's like it's not starting yet.
It's going to be huge in the future, and it's accelerating now.
Especially with the potential of Pakistan. I love the mountains in Pakistan. That's one of the reasons that I moved to Pakistan, because it's like really untapped potential of the country.
And now there's the nice boutique hotels all over the mountains, so it's not as rugged.
Yeah. You're originally from there, no? Because you look like the people from the north.
I'm originally from like pre-partition from there used to be a university called Aligarh around that area. That's not me.
Your ancestors.
And I was obviously born in Pakistan. But yes, there's some element of like the northern areas,
right?
Which you call KP area.
KP, yeah. Right.
Some of that, some of those genes, and some mixed genes from other parts.
India. Okay. So what? I think that also in Pakistan, in emerging market in general, there's like many gaps in investment. There's that early stage. There's that Series A. So which gaps of investment you are closing, and where you still think there is still some gaps that has to be closed with other actors?
Yeah, so look, when my first 2 funds, it was the best of times, right? Because the gap was pre-seed and seed.
Seed, yeah. Early stage.
Early stage. Now the gap is turning into pre-Series A, Series A, and in some cases Series B. But really, I'm all about returns, right? So I would go into pre-Series A and Series A, lead those rounds for the next fund, and just that's it. But I mean, people are expecting like 50,000 startups to come out of Pakistan. Sure, they will, but not, really, if you look at all of GCC, there's really like 15, 20 big platforms, right?
Right.
I think the winners have already been backed in Pakistan between the last 2 cycles. And now the next iteration, obviously, is what I would encourage founders to do, is I would focus more on blockchain and AI and the merger of those two, because it's a really interesting time you're heading into where the big LLMs treat them like iOS and Android, and then the app stores are launching. So you can now solve problems by developing local agents with local use cases.
So excited for that.
That's the fun part.
So excited for, I mean, like AI with blockchain, it has to be something. I'm interested a lot with also in crypto, and I believe it's the future of finance. What do you think about it?
Yeah, look,
raise funds. We will start raising funds.
My next, that was always my thesis of why I moved back here, because it was tokenization, and Bitcoin is just a digital gold. So think of the real world, right? We have the real world, real assets, and now everything is going to a virtual world. So whatever's here, real gold, digital gold. You have, like, let's say, real estate titles. That's what Ethereum or Solana are, the tokens there, right? And then once you have everything documented and verified and cashless systems, then the world velocity of money changes. Because I'll give you a quick example to close off with.
Wow.
I like to always spark neurons in people's brains, especially founders, right? Right now, if you need liquidity, let's say you own a house,
right,
or own a property, you have to basically, because there's a trust deficit, so you have to sell the whole asset, even if you just need it to get like 10% liquidity out to pay for a child's education or a health reason or whatever, right? Buying a car. In the future, you can probably, your token is going to have all the things associated with the file for a house.
Exactly.
Like authentication of each and every single element. And you can sit there and sell 10% of it to somebody sitting in some developed market that's like, you know what, I want to take some exposure to real estate in Pakistan, because it's a huge opportunity. And then imagine this, that if I try to sell it, for me to default on that person is impossible, because the wallet will split the sale and make sure that person gets 10% of the value of that house. If I put it on rent, 10% of the rent will automatically split in the wallet. So it's a very interesting, and then AI will govern all that, right? So a lot of the legal issues, things like that we'll face. So solve problems for those things. I'm mentioning about real estate because everybody in Pakistan loves real estate. So there's always, you can always combine things and come up with solutions.
Yeah, real estate's like taking a big chunk of investment, and I feel sometimes sad because like this money can go to the real economy and really inject liquidity in the market. And
remember,
this is something really...
That system died in 2008, the one we're in, and they're printing money to keep it propped up while they are building this system. When I say they, it's the US and Chinese.
Right.
And I'm completely convinced the US is behind Bitcoin. That was my thesis right from the beginning, that they don't have the gold that they did in 1945. China has the gold. So then you convince people it's digital gold. Remember, it's just a token, right? It's a virtual token. Where did that digital image come from of digital gold in it? And then eventually BlackRock validated that thesis by calling it digital gold.
Crazy.
So-
It's crazy. Yeah, I've seen it. And there's a
MicroStrategy,
that they are investing like crazy.
So it's very simple. The point in time we're in now, when you get geopolitical, the wars have gone from Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan, proxy wars, to the doorsteps of the empire, right? So it's Ukraine, Russia, and you're talking about now Taiwan, right? So when that starts to happen, typically the best portfolio managers, asset managers in the world, should start allocating 2% of their portfolio value, 2 to 7%, into gold and silver that are the insurance policy. Well, just so happens right at that time, BlackRock launches ETFs of Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I treat Bitcoin as digital gold and all the other altcoins as poor man's gold called silver. And so that's exactly what the allocations are now happening on Wall Street. So it's an interesting orchestration of events.
Exactly, that we are witnessing, and I'm happy to be part of this world today.
I think it's a great time to be alive.
to see that transition from
the transition is opportunity.
From the real world to the tokenized world.
Look, the last time this transition took place, the Kennedys became who they were, right? So because people that spot these changes, it creates these come every 100 years or so.
Right.
So we're very fortunate to be in it and to be in tech. So.
Exactly. And you, with your experience with founders, what do you think founders got wrong about fundraising in Pakistan and maybe in the broader emerging markets?
I think and we all did. I mean, so it's not just founders, getting caught up in determining your success rather than building a company on how much money you can raise, how quickly you can raise it.
Yeah.
That actually was literally like a drug.
This even was happening in Europe and France. I was like sick of, we raised that much. We're like, okay, what you have done with it?
Exactly, right? So, and then what I always tell my founders is that, look, it's always easier to sell a dream. But once you raise, then the scrutiny is going to be 10 times harder. So remember, for all these safes that you're raising, when you try to raise the next round, you better deliver as well. So, and most of them are smart, so they do that. And that's our job as investors to, be that therapist.
Them, yeah.
I use the word therapist / soundboard, and to kind of work with them, because there's no other option. It's a lot of them are very intelligent young individuals, and then there's that balance, right? I can't execute anymore, so I need them to execute. And all I can do is provide capital and guidance and experience, which is just living through time. And that's what aging is, right?
Mm-hmm. And do you think now, from your perspective, is Pakistan attractive to foreign investors? Not yet. It's still coming.
It is, but different
happened,
types.
But yeah.
We had the opportunistic allocation come into Pakistan out of FOMO in 2021.
Right.
I call that the .com bubble for frontier market VC or investments, startups. And that allocation, if you think about it, what was that? Okay, I'm sitting somewhere, and every fund has a 10% opportunistic that can go outside your mandate. None of them had Pakistan in their mandate. Suddenly they felt that Pakistan is the next big thing. It could be the next Malaysia, next India. So they all FOMO'd in with that allocation. And then when the bubble burst globally, not just in Pakistan,
right,
all of them are looking elsewhere now. So I don't think the VCs element is going to come in, but like I said, the big players have already been made. We're seeing more regional stuff. So we're seeing companies get backing from the sovereign funds in Riyadh and Abu Dhabi to move their headquarters there and scale there and try to build unicorns. Again, with that MENA vision and market access in mind, right? So what at least 6 of our portfolio companies have done is that they're maintaining the lead position in Pakistan. It's a huge opportunity. At the meantime, they've either relocated their headquarters to Riyadh or Abu Dhabi or DIFC. And then they have access to deep capital there. And then they're building regional plays, right? And then, and obviously you only enter when there's a gap in the GCC for what you built. And we're really good at tech. And you're seeing the same thing with Egyptian founders. These are the 2 strongest technical founders, the ecosystem, and also these countries had strong civil societies, right? So you have a lot of doctors, engineers. Of course. Well, civil society then gives you some level of free time to debate and also create stress.
There's a lot of problems, Pakistan and Egypt. There's a lot of similarities.
It's 2 sides of the same coin. A lot of similarities.
That's crazy. And how do you see the next 2-3 years? Because 5 years for me, it's already too long to project, and things are.
So I live in 2030, so for me, like.
So you live already in 2030.
Like, mentally, I'm like, because my thesis, if you spend time focusing on something,
right,
like you literally you may not get it right, but you can actually get it as close as possible. At least from if by definition, a day laborer is how long you can think, right? So day laborer is a person that worries about putting food on the table tonight, and they worry about tomorrow. A salaried employee is literally thinking month to month, right? Once you get into business, at a minimum, you have to think 6 months ahead. But as you become stronger and stronger, grow your business, you start thinking 3 years, 5 years, 10 years.
10 years.
And that comes from Jeff Bezos. By the way, he has an ode to long-term thinking, where if you think beyond your lifetime, what can you achieve potentially, right? Like as in like your ability to live. So let's say you can live till 80 or 100. You're like, okay, what will be the world like in 150 years? And then work backwards from there. But what you were saying in 3 years for Pakistan, look, I'll go 10 years. I actually wrote an article. I do a blog on the Tribune in Pakistan, Express Tribune.
Right.
I said Pakistan in 2040. And a lot of the problems, just so that founders can kind of read and assess there are ways you can solve these problems. It's a massively bullish opportunity. I'm extremely bullish on Pakistan. Technology is going to solve all our problems. Corruption, bad traffic, you name it, all autonomously driving vehicles will eventually take that away, right? Connectivity is not going to be an issue because whether you have Kuifang from the Chinese satellite system or Starlink, again, the two empires battling, they'll be dumping free data from on top for at least the masses, and then more premium data for others. So where you'll have your direct connectivity, you'll have every platform, and it'll be very difficult to break rules and regulations within AI-based governance, right? In a utopian world. So I think it's a huge opportunity, and then all of us are solving pieces. So what are my founders doing today? As the traditional banking system is upgrading to a digital banking system or the fintech, we've gone in and solved all those pieces, and banks, because inherently just like ABC, NBC, and CBS didn't see Netflix and YouTube disrupting them, the incumbents never see it. And then eventually they will adopt our technologies and it'll turn into a partnership. So similarly, as founders, you should be thinking about what you're building in the new digital world, and then they'll get adopted by different people. And this is a huge opportunity. And I think that's why you're here.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
You can see
I want to be part of it.
The deflation in that side and the growth of the big island, which is what the future is.
And contribute to it. So the sectors for you is like fintech now.
So I would say
AI.
So this next cycle, I think the e-commerce components are all done, right? Now you see consolidation and aggregation.
People are having access to goods and everything.
They do, and I mean over there, there's more M&A type opportunity, not VC particularly, and acquisitions, right? So regional players, Noon.com moves in, buys a platform, that type of game, right?
Yeah.
Or local platforms
I've seen it.
do share swaps and create a bigger platform.
Right.
For me, then it's the next cycle is predominantly fintech, AI, and blockchain, and reluctantly climate tech. It's fun, but it's kind of boring. I mean, for me at least, right? It is a real issue. I'm not contesting that, but the returns, I focus on returns. I mean, it's really painful and drawn out.
Yeah, whenever you're talking to hardware,
I have to put it in there just for an allocation if I'm doing a fund, but I never lie to my investors. It doesn't excite me to that level, right? It's like, okay, fine, it's an EV.
Maybe we can do some climate tech.
Exactly. So.
IoT also, maybe, no?
Yes, I mean, IoT comes in your blockchain.
All this data, exactly. All this
element,
data
So
economy.
the blockchain is just a database, right? And it's a decentralized database, which I actually believe is centralized, but it's just a hoodwink to call it decentralized. But it's locking in the data. So I'll close this off because I know it's been a long podcast. Today we live in a trust-based database internet. The trust-based data in a very layman's term would be like, well, I think it's you. There's a Facebook profile that's yours, but somebody's made a fake profile.
Right.
So it's 6 profiles, right? So I have to trust that this is the right data, but I'm not sure. Blockchain will authenticate that data. So that data ownership comes back to you and you've authenticated. And if you engage with any of the AI agents, you'll see that the mistakes are based on data.
Right.
Availability of data on the internet. Once it's locked, then AI is going to thrive because now data sources are locked and authenticated, right? So blockchain is actually the authentication of data. And data is the new oil.
Definitely.
And which is now evident with how it's needed, right? So it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Excited for that. Thank you, Faisal.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
For having this deep discussion. I'm not sure that everyone is gonna follow, but at least it will give them a hint of understanding and go search more, dig deep more. At least you have like some sectors that are really gonna thrive. Sorry, yeah.
Exactly. No, I'm saying my podcasts are always meant for people to come back years later and see them. So the ones that see them, I've done this in the past. A lot of what's playing out, I said in 21, 22. At that time, people were holding their head saying, why is he talking about geopolitics? And so in the same way,
connected.
So, but I hope every time you wake up like 1% or 2% of the population, that's when you create good founders also. Right?
Exactly, the 2% population that will lead the whole country or the whole region. Thank you very much, Faisal, for your insights. It was very insightful for me first, and I hope that it will be for the audience. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure. Thanks.